I never imagined the man I trusted would try to replace me with a diamond ring, but when I found out, I didn't just cry, planned a revenge he'd never see coming. If you've ever been betrayed, watch this all the way to the end. Before we start, hit like, share this story, and subscribe for real-life drama you can't miss. I still remember the first time I saw Seraphine. She had this effortless elegance, the kind that makes a room pause for a moment. I was drawn to her smile, the way her laughter seemed to ripple into the air and make everything else fade. It felt like fate, or maybe I just wanted to believe in it. From that day forward, I was hooked, completely convinced that I had found someone I could spend forever with. And for a while, it truly felt like forever was ours. We built a life that outsiders would envy. Weekend getaways, late-night drives under city lights, quiet mornings with coffee in hand, our shoulders touching without even noticing. Every small gesture felt monumental. I would sometimes catch her staring at me, that glint in her eyes that made me feel like I was the only man alive. And for me, that was everything, the reason I worked harder, smiled brighter, and tried to be the man she seemed to deserve. But life isn't just sunlight and laughter, is it? There were cracks too. Small things I ignored at first. The sudden tension when a message buzzed on her phone. The way she'd sometimes drift off during conversations, lost in thoughts I wasn't part of. I told myself it was nothing, just stress from work, or maybe she was just tired. I wanted to trust her blindly, because I loved her so much that fear of betrayal didn't even feel real. I convinced myself that love could fix anything, that we were untouchable. Even when arguments flared in, we had them. Like any couple, I always felt we'd come out stronger. Her hand in mine after a fight, her voice soft and apologetic, always made the anger evaporate. I began to believe that our bond was unshakable. The highs were exhilarating and the lows manageable. I thought I could see the future with her, every milestone, every laugh, every shared secret. And maybe that's what made the betrayal sting it. Wasn't just the act itself. It was the shattering of every hope I had wrapped around her. Looking back, I can pinpoint moments that seemed insignificant then but now feel like glaring warnings. The extra time spent on her phone, the slight hesitation when she mentioned friends or colleagues, the way she sometimes avoided my gaze. I chose to see them as trivial, meaningless. I wanted to live in the illusion of perfect love, in the story I had written for us. Little did I know that behind those smiles, behind the whispered "I love yous," a different story was unfolding, a story that would soon reveal the depth of betrayal I could never have imagined. It started as a day like any other. I was scrolling aimlessly on my phone, half distracted, when a notification caught my eye on ad for jewelry, some dazzling diamond ring. I almost swiped past it, but something made me pause, and that's when I saw it, her name, Seraphine, engraved on a gift registry, alongside a man I didn't know, Daxton Crow. My chest tightened instantly, a cold, heavy weight settling over me. I stared at the screen, convinced my eyes were playing tricks. At first I told myself it couldn't be real. Maybe it was a coincidence, some glitch, a different Seraphine. But the more I looked, the more the pieces started to fall together, the messages I had seen. The little secrets, the tiny lies I had brushed off. It wasn't a coincidence. It was her, and it was deliberate. My hands shook, my mind racing, trying to process something I had never imagined could happen in my life. The woman I loved, the one I thought would never hurt me, was planning to replace me with a diamond ring? I confronted her that evening, my voice trembling despite my attempt at control. I asked her about the ring, about Daxton, about everything I had seen. She laughed it off, dismissive, and called it nothing, a joke even. But I could see the flicker of unease in her eyes, the tiny hesitation that betrayed her calm facade. That laugh, meant to soothe, cut me deeper than any words could. I felt disbelief morph into something sharper, hot and searing, that made my teeth clench and my fists tremble. For hours I replayed every memory, every laugh, every whispered promise. How many times had I been blind to the signs? How had I trusted so completely? My stomach twisted, my chest aching with the weight of betrayal. But alongside the hurt, a different feeling began to rise. Clarity. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could decide how I responded. And deep down, I knew I wouldn't let this slide. As I sat alone that night, staring at the ceiling, I started planning not out of spite, not out of blind rage, but with a cold, deliberate precision. I would make her and him realize exactly what they had lost, exactly what they had risked, and I would do it in a way they would never see coming. That night, heartbreak turned into determination, and from that determination, a plan began to take shape, a plan that would turn the betrayal into the sweetest form of revenge imaginable. I remember the night after the discovery, like a hard-edged photograph, everything sharp, every emotion cut into clear lines. I couldn't sleep. My head buzzed with memories and questions until the sound became a physical thing, thudding in my temples. For a while, I let myself fall apart. I sat on the floor, back against the couch, and let the grief come in waves, the kind that doesn't make much noise but hollows you out. There were moments I would laugh at the absurdity of it all, then cry at the realization that the life I trusted was, in part, a carefully staged performance. The bed felt too big. The silence between us felt like an accusation. Anger arrived like a second heartbeat. At first it was raw, clumsy shouts in my head, images of the two of them together that I could not unsee. I imagined confronting them with the worst of my pain, letting the fury pour out until it emptied me. But fury without direction is just noise. After the initial explosion, a quieter, colder thing took its place. I noticed how my hands steadied when I pictured a plan, how my breath shortened when I mapped the steps in my head. The hurt was still there, thick and bitter. But it became fuel for something else, an intention to reclaim the story, to flip the script so that their arrogance would not go unpunished. I started small. I cataloged every sign I'd missed, every inconsistency, every single lie that had been dressed up as an explanation. I listed the moments that, at the time, I had forgiven because I loved her. The list grew into a ledger of betrayal, and in that ledger, I found power. I imagined consequences that were clever and precise, public exposure that didn't stoop to the base, but instead revealed their choices in a way that made the world see them clearly. I wanted humiliation that matched their deception, equal parts truth and spectacle, delivered with surgical calm. Planning became ritual. I woke early, not to mourn, but to move. I thought about timing, about who needed to know and when. Got the small reputations that could topple when the right facts met the right ears. I rehearsed my words in the mirror until they were smooth and controlled. I practiced being the man who had been wounded but was no longer at the mercy of emotion. Every detail mattered, the image I would project, the evidence I would present, the precise moment to reveal the diamond for what it was, a symbol, not of love, but of replacement. Beneath it all was a strange serenity. I was no longer the person who simply loved. I was the person who had been wronged and decided to answer in a way that would leave no room for denial. The collapse taught me how brittle trust could be. The planning taught me how durable resolve can become. By the time the plan was set in my mind, the tears had dried and been replaced by a calm I had never thought possible, cold, precise, and unstoppable. I dressed the plan in ordinary words so it wouldn't look like a trap. To everyone else, it would sound like reconciliation, a quiet attempt to stitch a torn thing back together. To me, it was choreography, every line rehearsed, every silence arranged. I practiced being the wounded man who still loved, the man who would sit across from her and make her believe the old script was back on stage. That performance had to be flawless. Any tremor, any hint that I was calculating would ruin the effect. So I practiced calm until calm became second nature. I invited them both under the pretense of a small celebration. Nothing flashy, something intimate that wouldn't draw suspicion. I let Seraphine hear my tentative excitement, let her imagine a future softened by my apparent forgiveness. With Daxton, I kept things polite, bland, the kind of civility that hides a knife. In my head, I timed every moment, the laugh that would lower their guard, the story I'd tell that would remind them of our life, the look I'd give that would feel like absolution. That look was bait. I wanted them to relax into the illusion that I couldn't possibly know. People who feel safe reveal themselves. Behind the courtesy, I planted the architecture of exposure. I arranged for small confirmations to appear where they'd notice messages that implied an outsider's interest. A casual mention of someone aware of private details, a carefully leaked social whisper. Nothing overt. Subtlety was crucial. I wanted them to feel the edges of discovery without recognizing the hand that pushed them. I tested their reactions, nudging the conversation toward topics that would make Daxton reveal more than he intended. Making Seraphine comfortable enough to laugh at what she thought was a shared memory, every reaction fed the plan. I guarded my own face like a secret. There were moments when rage flickered, but I swallowed it and rewired it into stillness. I'd learned that the most dangerous thing I could be was predictable anger. The more unruffled I stayed, the worse their guilt would feel. I cultivated that serenity until it seemed natural and till even I believed I might forgive. That was the cruelest part of the setup. Empathy as camouflage. I let them measure me by that warmth, and they did what cheaters always do when given permission. They let their guard down. As the evening approached, I rehearsed the final pivot in my head until it was mechanical, the pause that would make them listen. The exact phrasing that would put the ring back into focus as evidence rather than ornament. I imagined the micro-expressions Daxton's tightening jaw, Seraphine's sudden silence, and felt a satisfaction that was as clinical as it was vindictive. I wasn't looking for noise. I wanted irrevocable clarity. When the moment came, there would be no doubt left for them or for anyone who watched. The setup was not just about catching them. It was about making the truth undeniable in a way that would leave them with no comfortable story to hide behind. I set the table with ordinary dishes and simpler things so no one would suspect. When they arrived, I kept my voice warm, invited small talk, let them settle into the illusion. Then I let the conversation drift until the right moment. Then I stopped pretending. I spoke calmly, each word chosen to cut cleanly through their complacency. I told them I had something to show them, and when Seraphine's face flickered, Daxton's smile grew tight. I let silence hang, the kind that expands until it presses on the chest. Then I said what I had found, the registry, the name, the messages. The words landed like stones. They reacted in the ways I had imagined. Daxton's jaw tightened. He tried to laugh it off, to be dismissive, but his eyes betrayed panic. Seraphine reached for excuses, a quick volley of denials that sounded thin and rehearsed. My breath shortened, not because of anger, but because of an acquired certainty. This would no longer be something they could control. I pushed further. I produced the proof screenshots, timestamps, a voice recording that caught the hush of conspiratorial planning. I watched as their faces changed from casual to uncomfortable. I watched as the air between them and me went brittle. Then the shouting began. It wasn't the cinematic, orderly argument I'd played out in my head. It was raw and messy and real. Voices rose, words cut, and for a moment, I almost forgot the meticulous restraint I had cultivated. Seraphine's voice broke on a name. Daxton's hand slammed into the table in a burst of anger, sending a glass skittering and leaving a crescent of spilled red. I matched their volume with a steady, controlled anger, not to be loud, but to be unmistakable. I accused them of replacing love with inventory, of treating my life like an accessory. I exposed their choices in terms that left no room for glossing over. The slap was an involuntary punctuation, her hand across my cheek, a sound that felt both like repudiation and an admission. It reverberated through me, but it did not deter the plan. If anything, it crystallized what I intended to do next. I moved with deliberate calm, handed the ring back to Daxton, as if returning a borrowed thing, and outlined the consequences I had arranged. Social exposure. The people who would now know, the clients who trusted appearances, their faces went white. In that instant, I saw the true scale of betrayal reflected not in jewelry, but in ruined pride. I left them with the truth and walked away, the taste of revenge tempered by a quiet gravity, knowing the rest would unfold without my hands. It worked eventually. The house was quiet after they left, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost tangible. I sat in the chair where I had planned every word, every gesture, and finally let myself breathe. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation ebbed slowly, leaving a strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity. I wasn't celebrating in the way movies show revenge. I was absorbing the weight of what had happened, letting it settle into a slow, deliberate understanding. The world felt sharper, edges more defined, because I had seen people stripped of the illusions they hide behind. Seraphine and Daxton were gone, but their presence lingered in every corner. I imagined them in the aftermath, her face contorted with guilt, his arrogance faltering. I didn't revel in their pain. I felt the quiet satisfaction of justice served, of balance restored. It wasn't cruelty that drove MIT, was the need for truth to be undeniable, for actions to meet consequences. The emotional fallout wasn't just theirs, though. It was mine, too. I realized I had changed, that the heartbreak I had felt had forged something new, a kind of emotional armor tempered by strategy and self-respect. I thought back to the betrayal, to the tiny signs I had missed, and I let myself feel the full measure of loss. Not just the loss of trust, but the loss of the version of our life I had imagined. That version didn't exist anymore, and I had mourned it in the quiet of my own mind, alone with the ache. But alongside the mourning came relief. I was no longer blind. I could see clearly now both the damage caused by their choices and the strength I had discovered in myself by responding rather than succumbing. The house, once a sanctuary, felt different. The spaces where laughter had lived now echoed with a new understanding. I didn't need to confront anyone further. The impact of what I had done would ripple outward, without interference. I allowed myself to sit with the stillness, to watch as the tension released from my shoulders. The satisfaction wasn't immediate gratification. It was the knowledge that the universe had tilted just enough, that what was broken had been addressed in the most precise way possible. As I stood and walked through the rooms, I felt the weight lift gradually. The emotional fallout wasn't about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming my sense of self. It's about emerging from betrayal with dignity intact. The karma had done its work, but so had I, and in that quiet aftermath, I recognized a hard, steady truth. Pain can shape you. Betrayal can teach you, and revenge, when wielded with clarity and restraint, can restore more than it destroys. I felt lighter, not just because of what I had done, but because I had survived IT intact, aware and unbroken. The days after the confrontation felt surreal, like walking through a world that had shifted slightly on its axis. Everything looked the same, yet nothing was quite the same anymore. I noticed small things that had gone unnoticed before the sunlight catching the edges of the furniture. The way a breeze moved through the curtains, even the faint scent of coffee in the morning. It was as though the universe had returned a quiet acknowledgement of what had been done, a subtle nod that balance had been restored. I thought often of Seraphine and Daxton, not with hatred, but with an understanding that some people reveal themselves only when given the chance. Their betrayal had been brutal, but it was also transparent. They had chosen their paths, and I had chosen mine in response. Karma, I realized, wasn't about petty payback. It was about the natural consequences of actions. The universe doesn't need to punish. It simply balances. I had only helped set that balance in motion, a careful nudge toward clarity and truth. In this quiet, I found something I hadn't expected: peace. Not the hollow peace of surrender, but the solid, grounded kind that comes from knowing you acted with integrity and strategy. I reflected on the rage that had once consumed me, the heartbreak that had nearly swallowed me whole. And I saw it now as raw materials, something I had transformed into strength and insight. Every sleepless night, every pang of doubt had been a step toward this moment of understanding. I wasn't just the man who had been wronged. I was the man who had endured, who had planned, and who had emerged intact. The diamond ring that had sparked this chaos no longer held power over me. It was a symbol, yes, but it was also a lesson. Love and trust can be fragile, but awareness and resolve are formidable. I let go of the obsession with revenge's theatrics and embraced the quiet satisfaction of its result. I could feel it in the way I moved through the world now, steadier, lighter, confident. The people who had betrayed me would carry their guilt, but I carried liberation of freedom that no amount of deceit could take away. As I walked into a new morning, the sun spilling gold across the city streets, I smiled at the clarity I had found. The pain of betrayal had transformed into wisdom. The chaos had distilled into composure. Karma had worked its quiet, inevitable magic, and I had survived it with dignity. I felt stronger, sharper, and unshakable, aware that life could never again catch me entirely unprepared. And in that awareness, I understood the ultimate truth. Betrayal can wound, but it can also awaken. I had been broken, yes, but I had also been reborn clear-eyed, resilient and unbroken, ready to live the life I truly deserved.